There are some stories so terrifying, so far beyond belief. How could this be true? And yet many people have reported as seeing these children firsthand. What do they want? What if one day they cross paths with you? This is the story of the black-eyed children. Are you scared? In the quiet town of Millfield, nestled between the whispering pines and the shadowy hills, a darkness lurks. It takes the form of children, children with eyes as black as the void. This is their story, and the stories of those who have encountered them. It was a chilly evening in October. I was waiting for my husband to come home from work. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the shadows grew long. That's when I saw them, two children standing at the edge of the woods. They looked like any other kids, but their eyes were black, not just dark, but completely void of color. I thought I was imagining things, but then they started walking toward me. I called out to them, "Hey, are you lost?" But they didn't respond. They just kept coming, their heads tilted slightly, as if they were studying me. I felt a chill run down my spine, like ice water coursing through my veins. As they approached, I noticed their clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of a storybook. One wore a tattered dress, the other a pair of shorts and a faded t-shirt. They looked so out of place, and yet they felt so familiar, like a haunting memory I couldn't quite grasp. I felt compelled to invite them in, but something deep inside me screamed to run. I stood frozen, watching as they drew closer, their expressions blank, devoid of any emotion. I finally found my voice and shouted, "Get away from me!" They blinked, and in that moment I saw it. Their eyes were not just black, they were empty, like two voids staring back at me. I turned and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked it and pressed my back against it, my heart pounding in my chest. I could still feel their gaze on me, even through the door. I watched as they stood there for what felt like hours, unmoving, just staring. Then, without a sound, they turned and walked back into the woods, disappearing into the shadows. I thought it was over, questioning if what I saw really happened. I was tired. Maybe it was all imagined, but something inside me changed. A feeling as though they took something from me with them, part of my soul. Weeks later, I realized it wasn't over. They kept coming back, standing outside my house, watching. Every time I feel more drawn to them, maybe next time, I'll invite them in. The sheer darkness that follows these children is what seems to stir enough fear in us to know to run. However, for many, their first encounter wasn't their last. Their souls marked and minds altered. It's just a matter of time until someone opens the door and invites the children in. Hopefully it won't be you. Subscribe for more. Hit that like button. Now! The year was 1998, and the air outside the old movie theater in Abilene, Texas, carried a weight that felt heavier than it should have. Brian Bethel sat slouched behind the wheel of his car, trying to kill time before the show started. The marquee lights flickered faintly above him, casting fractured shadows across the cracked asphalt lot. To pass the minutes, he scribbled out checks under the dim dome light of his sedan. He didn't notice them at first, not until the sharp rap against the passenger side window jolted him upright, like a live wire had been threaded through his spine. At first glance, they were just kids. Two boys standing there in the gloom, their silhouettes wavering slightly, as if the night itself couldn't decide how solid they ought to be. Brian laughed nervously at his own jumpiness. He rolled down the window just enough to hear what they wanted. "We need a ride," one of them said, voice flat but insistent, like the scrape of dry leaves against pavement. "It's urgent." They were close now, too close, and the darkness seemed to pool around them, swallowing details. Their faces were pale smudges, their features blurred by the absence of light. Sorry," he stammered, leaning back instinctively. "I can't help you guys." His voice sounded thin, even to himself, like it might snap under the pressure of whatever invisible force pressed down on the car. The taller of the two tilted his head slightly, bird-like, unnervingly deliberate. "Please," he said, though it wasn't quite a plea. There was no desperation in his tone, only a cold certainty that sent a shiver crawling up Brian's neck. "We really need to get home." And then Brian saw their eyes, or rather the voids where their eyes should have been. Black, endless, like staring into twin abysses that stretched beyond comprehension. No whites, no irises, just pure consuming darkness. For a moment, his breath hitched, caught somewhere between disbelief and terror. This wasn't possible. People didn't have eyes like that, but these weren't people. The boys didn't move, didn't flinch. They just stood there, watching him with those terrible, unblinking voids, their expressions unreadable beneath the veil of shadow. Brian fumbled for the ignition, his thoughts spiraling wildly. What the hell were they? Why were they here? And why did he feel like if he let them inside, if he gave in to their request, he'd never see daylight again? With a roar of the engine, he peeled out of the parking space, tires squealing against the asphalt. In the rearview mirror, he caught one last glimpse of them. Two small figures standing motionless in the middle of the lot, their black eyes gleaming faintly in the dim light. Then they were gone, swallowed by the night. But Brian knew better than to think they were truly gone. Whatever they were, wherever they came from, they weren't the kind of thing that stayed put. He too felt as though they captured a piece of his soul, that at some point, they'd return for the rest. These are just two of the many encounters people have had with the black-eyed children. What would you do? Would you help? Would you let them in? If I was you, I'd run. Are you scared?